Hello, all. Good morning. Welcome back to another class of Business Laws and Management by Excel Academy. I hope you all are having a great weekend. Firstly, apologies for stopping yesterday's class. There was some technical error because of which we couldn't go through with the class. But yes, we will be continuing the chapter today, which is your negotiable instruments. I hope everyone's understood all of the concepts that we have gone through so far and are ready to start off with the next concepts. All right. So in the last class, we were discussing the different types of negotiable instruments that are there, starting with your promissory note, your bill of exchange, as well as check, which is what we'll be studying today. I hope you all have joined the WhatsApp group that Excel Academy has created, wherein you will be getting all of the notes and materials that we use in class, any important class related updates, as well as your class related announcements. All right. Without further ado, let's begin with today's class. So in the previous class, we had to go through the module of the topics that we had discussed in the previous class. So let's start off with that, and then we will start with the next topic, which is our check. All right. Just allow me a moment, please. Yes. So what are the different kinds of negotiable instruments that are there? So we started off by understanding our promissory note. All right. So what is promissory note? It is an instrument in writing, all right, containing an unconditional undertaking. Okay. Containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker to pay a certain sum of money or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. All right. So we understood that promissory note is a type of negotiable instrument wherein the maker is making a promise to pay a certain sum of money to the other person. All right. So who were the parties to the promissory note? All right. So we started off with maker is the person who makes or executes the note, and he is the one who is promising to pay the amount that is stated. All right. The payee, the one to whom the note is payable to. Holder is either the payee or some other person. So let's say, for example, if A promises to pay B, okay, a certain sum of money, say rupees 5,000, okay, B becomes the payee as well as the holder. But if B has endorsed it to someone else, then that other person to whom it has been endorsed to becomes the holder, okay. You have the endorser, so B endorsing it to say C, B will become the endorser and C will become the endorsee, all right. Then we moved on to understanding the essentials of a promissory note, wherein the first one, it must be in writing, all right. Then there should be a promise or a clear undertaking to pay. All right. Then the promise or undertaking to pay must be unconditional. That is, there should be no conditions to pay. For example, A promises to pay when he is able to or as soon as possible or after your marriage to D. Okay. These are all conditional. All right. That these events may or may not happen. So it is very important to understand that your promise to pay has to be unconditional. The maker must sign the promissory note in token of an undertaking to pay to the payee or his order. Okay, so signature is very important. Maker must be a certain person. Payee must also be certain. Sum payable must be certain, and payment must be in the legal money of the country. Okay, so therefore, a promise to pay rupees 500 and deliver 10 quintals of rice is not a promissory note. Why so? Rupees 500 is legal money, but do you think 10 quintals of rice is legal money? No. All right. Next, it must be properly stamped in accordance with the provisions of the Indian Stamp Act. Each stamp must be duly cancelled by the maker's signature or initials. All right. So now let's say, for example, you have written a promissory note where you are saying that I promise to pay so and so person such amount of money. All right. But if it is not signed or if it is not stamped, then that will not be a valid promissory note. Okay. It must contain the name of the place, number, and the date on which it is made. Basically, all of these information which is relevant for your promissory note should be mentioned here. However, their omission will not render the instrument invalid. Okay, that is, if it is undated, it is deemed to be the date on the date of delivery. Okay, but it is still advisable to include them. Okay, it is still advisable to include them. The next one which we saw was your bill of exchange. Okay, so what is a promissory note? A promise to pay. Bill of exchange is an order to pay, all right, wherein it contains an unconditional order signed by the maker. Okay, what is the maker doing here? The maker is directing a certain person to pay a certain sum of money, okay, again to the order of a person or the bearer of the instrument. All right, now the definition of bill of exchange is very very similar to that of the promissory note, and we also saw that their features are more or less similar. Okay. When we speak of the parties to your bill of exchange, we start off with drawer, the person who draws the bill. Okay. Drawee, the person on whom the bill is drawn. Okay. So the drawee will also be the payer. Correct? The acceptor is the one who accepts the bill. Okay, so the drawee will only be the acceptor, right? So if say A is ordering B to pay rupees 10,000 to C, B will become the drawee because the bill of exchange is drawn upon him. B also becomes the acceptor because we understood that in bill of exchange, acceptance is of utmost importance. Do you need acceptance in promissory note? No. Do you need acceptance in your bill of exchange? Yes. Then B becomes your acceptor as well. Pay, the one to whom the sum stated is payable. Okay. Now either the drawer can draw it on himself, right? Let's say A orders B to pay A rupees 5,000. Okay. Then A becomes your payee as well. But if there's a third party involved, let's say the payment has to be made to C. All right. Then C will become your payee. Then we understood the holder, the one who has the promissory note in the possession. Okay. Then you have your endorser, that is the one who endorses the bill to someone else, and that someone else becomes your endorsee. Then we have drawee in case of need. Okay, drawee in case of need, that besides the above parties, another person is called drawee in case of need. That is, it may be introduced at the option of the drawer. Okay, the name of such a person may be inserted either by the drawer or any endorser in order that resort may be held to him in case of need. Okay, so if the bill is dishonored by either your non-acceptance or non-payment, that is when your drawee in case of need will come into the picture, very much like your guarantee. Acceptor for honor, any person may voluntarily become a party to the bill as an acceptor. A person who on the refusal by the original drawee to accept the bill or to furnish better security, okay, when demanded by the notary, accept the bill supra protest in order to safeguard the honor of the drawer. Okay, that is, if honor is not in a position to pay off that money, then the acceptor for honor will come into picture. The whole idea is to protect the honor of your drawee. Okay. Essentials, very similar to that of your promissory note. It has to be in writing, unconditional order, signed, your parties must be certain, sum payable must be certain, and all of your formalities should be followed. Okay. Then we saw your distinction between bill of exchange and promissory note, where promissory note is a two-party instrument, whereas bill of exchange is a three-party instrument. Okay, note cannot be made payable to the maker himself. Why? Because the maker itself is the payer. Okay, while a bill, drawee and a drawer and the payee can be the same person. A note contains an unconditional promise by the maker. So there is a promise here, and in case of bill of exchange, there is an order. Okay, a note is presented for payment without any prior acceptance by the maker. So there is no requirement for acceptance in case of what? In case of your promissory note. Okay, but a bill needs to be accepted. The liability of the maker is primary and absolute. So whoever is promising to pay, it is their primary liability, but the liability of the drawer is secondary and conditional. Okay, who is making it? The drawer. Whom is it addressed to? The drawee. So the drawee's liability is primary and absolute. The foreign bill must be protected for dishonor, but no such protest is necessary in case of a note. All right. Then when a bill is dishonored, due notice of dishonor is to be given by the holder. Okay. So when a bill is dishonored, due notice of the dishonor is to be given by the holder to the drawer and the intermediate endorsee, but no such notice should be given in case of a note. Okay. Then we had a bill can be drawn payable to the bearer provided it is not payable on demand. Promissory note, you cannot pay it to the bearer. All right. Bearer is who? Bearer is the holder of the instrument. Okay. Now, how did your bill of exchange originate? That is, they were used for payment by traders, okay, residing in one country to another country with a view to avoid transmission of coin. Why? Because there was threat of theft. Okay. Nowadays, they are used more as trade bills, both in connection with domestic trade and foreign trade, and are either called your inland bills and foreign bills respectively. Okay. Next comes in your inland bills. So bill of exchange is an inland instrument if it is. So inland is within the country. Okay. Within the country. What should be done within the country? Drawn or payable in India. Okay. Drawn in India, even though it is payable in a foreign country. Okay, so in case of your inland bill, your payability does not matter. Okay, whether it is payable in India or foreign country, what matters is that it should be drawn in India. Okay, what matters that it should be drawn in India. All right. But a promissory note to be an inland should be drawn and payable in India as it has no drawee. Okay. As it has no drawee. Now, two essentials are it has to be drawn or made in India, or the instrument must be payable in India. Okay. Now, you can see, for example, a bill drawn in India, payable in USA upon a person in India is an inland instrument. Why? Because it is payable in USA, it is still fine. What is there? The drawn in India part is important. Okay. A bill drawn in India and payable in India, but also drawn on a person in USA is also an inland instrument. All right. Next, we move on to the concept of your foreign bills. Okay. All bills which are not inland are deemed to be foreign bills. Okay. And they are normally drawn in set of 3 copies. Then we move on to understanding the concept of your trade bill, which is for a genuine trade transaction. Okay, which is for a genuine trade transaction. When a trader sells goods on credit, he may make use of a bill of exchange. Okay, let's say, for example, A has sold goods of rupees 1000 to B and allows his 90 days to pay the price. Okay, A will draw a bill of exchange saying what? Okay, 90 days after date, pay A or order. Okay, so who is A? A is the drawer. Okay, A is the drawer and also A becomes the payee, correct? The sum of 1000 rupees only for value received. Okay, the sum of value received, okay, which is 1000 rupees. Okay, A will sign the bill. So is your essential being completed here? Yes, because your drawer has to sign the negotiable instrument, which is your bill of exchange. A will sign the bill and then present it to B for acceptance. Okay, so in this case, who is A? A is the drawer. Okay, because it is upon him that the instrument it is by him that the instrument is being drawn. Okay, A is also the payee because it is saying 90 days pay A or order. Okay, and who is B? B is the drawee. Correct, because the instrument is drawn upon B and B will also become the payer because B has to pay A how much? Rupees 1000. All right. Now, if B agrees to obey the order of A, he will accept the bill. Okay. Acceptance is very important in case of your bill of exchange. Yes. He will accept the bill by writing across its face the word accepted. Okay. And signing in his name. Now, anyone can accept it? No. Who has to accept it? The drawee. That is, whoever the bill is drawn upon, they have to accept the bill. Okay. So B, the drawee, now becomes the acceptor of the bill and is liable to its holders, right? Why are we saying holders? Primarily it is payable to A. But let's say, for example, if A endorses it to someone else, that new person becomes the holder and the bill becomes payable to them. Okay. Such a bill is your genuine trade bill. All right. Then we understood a very unique concept, which is your accommodation bill. Okay, accommodation bill is a bill which is drawn wherein there is no genuine transaction between the two people. Okay, so there are no genuine trade bills, but what happens to protect the honor of a person? Okay, how does it work? So it is a bill in which a person lends or gives his name. Okay, very, very important, lends or gives his name. So we understood this example in our previous class. Okay, wherein, let's say, for example, the bank requires a lakh balance to give a loan to someone. All right, then in that case, A may draw a bill upon B saying B owes rupees 1 lakh to A. Okay, and A can show that to a bank that saying I have a bill of exchange which will pay me 1 lakh in say 30 days. All right, although there is no transaction between A and B, it is just to show a proof that A has balance in his account. All right, in other words, a bill which is drawn, accepted or endorsed without consideration, okay, will be actually pay A rupees 1 lakh? No, but what is happening here? It is just to show that 1 lakh rupees is going to be receivable by A in a certain period of time. Okay, this is called an accommodation bill. The party lending his name to oblige the other party is known as accommodating or accommodation party. Okay, so B is going to be our accommodating party and the party so obliged is called the party accommodated, who is your A. Okay, and accommodation party is not liable. Why? Because they're just lending their name. There's no actual transaction which is taking place. All right, but the accommodation party is liable to a holder for value who takes the accommodation bill for value. All right, that is, if someone has purchased that bill, then the accommodating party will become liable. Okay, thus A may be in need of money and approach his friends B and C, who instead of lending the money propose to draw an accommodation bill, and here is the form in which it is drawn. Okay, 3 months after date, pay A or order the sum of rupees 1000 only to B and C. What is missing here? Their signatures are missing here. Okay, signatures of whom? A, as well as the acceptance of your B and C is missing. Okay, next, If the credit of B and C is good, this device enables A to get an advance of rupees 1000 from the banker at the commercial rate of discount. Okay. The real debtor is not C but the A. Why? Because he is the payee who promises to reimburse C before the period of 3 months only. Okay. So A becomes your principal debtor and B and C are mere sureties. Okay. B and C are your mere sureties. That is, they are providing a comfort to the bank saying, yes, we owe money to A and you will be in a good position to lend your money to A. All right. Next is your bill in sets. Okay. We just saw when we were understanding inland bill and foreign bill, we saw that foreign bills are drawn in sets of three. Okay. Foreign bill are drawn in sets of three. Okay. So they are usually drawn in sets to avoid the danger of loss. Okay. So they are drawn in sets of three, each of which is called via. And as soon as one of them is paid, the others become inoperative. All right. All these form one bill and the drawer must sign and deliver all of them to the payee. Okay. What happens if the drawer mistakenly accepts all the parts of the same bill? He will be liable on each part as if it were a separate bill. So even though they are three bills, they are just copies of the bill. The amount that is owed will be the one which is mentioned in just one bill. Okay. And lastly, in the previous class, we understood the right to duplicate your bill, wherein a bill of exchange, if it has been lost before it was overdue, the person who was the holder to may apply to the drawer, okay, to give him another bill of the same tenor. Okay. That is, let's say, for example, your bill was due on 31st of March 2026, but you have lost it on 22nd of March 2026. All right. So it is well before it is due. So what happens in that case? The holder can request the drawer to issue another bill of the same tenor. Okay. It is only the holder who can ask for a duplicate bill, promissory note, or check. All right. So I hope you are clear with all of the topics that we discussed. In today's class, we just started off with the module because it was pending from our previous class. If you're all clear, we will proceed with the next topic, which is going to be our bank draft. Okay. So we went through this and understood the entire presentation in the last class. Okay. Starting with the negotiable instruments, the characteristics, the types, the different types, and the ones which are in your Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881. All right. Today we will start off with the next topic, which is going to be your bank draft. Okay. Which is going to be your bank draft. All right. Yes. So now, bank draft, your bill of exchange may be drawn by one, it is a bill of exchange which is drawn by one bank on another bank or on its own branch, all right? But it is a negotiable instrument itself. That is, the features of bank draft, it is drawn only by the bank. Okay, it cannot easily be countermanded and it cannot be made payable to bearer. So basically, it is drawn by the bank, okay, on a specific person. Okay, on a specific person or order of a person. Why are we saying so? Because it is not payable to your bearer. Okay. So why do you think bank draft came into picture? So sometimes it is preferred to use, say, instruments over your physical cash, right? Why? Because physical cash is more difficult to handle than that of your any instrument. That is why the concept of your bank draft came into picture, all right? So it is an instrument, a bill of exchange, which is drawn by a bank on whom? On another bank or its own branch itself, okay? However, the usage has become less because you have all of these form of your online transactions happening, okay? You have your NEFT, your RTGS, IMPS, UPI, especially this is something that has taken the payment system by storm, wherein every person now has access to UPI and even businesses are resorting to it, all right? But it does not mean that it is no longer valid. It is absolutely valid legally. Under which act? Under your Negotiable Instrument Act of your 1881. All right. Next, we move on to understanding check. So this is the third most important negotiable instrument as mentioned under the act. All right. So in our previous class, we understood the clear differences between your promissory note, your bill of exchange, and check. So when we were understanding check, what did we understand? Your check is a bill of exchange itself, correct? It is drawn on a banker always. Okay, it is drawn on a banker always. That is you. Let's say, for example, you have an account with SBI. Okay, or you have an account with HDFC Bank. Okay, so if you are issuing a check in the name of, say, so you are A, okay, you have, say, purchased goods from B. Okay, so you need to make payment to B. All right, so A will draw a check. Okay, A will draw a check upon who? Upon HDFC Bank. Upon HDFC Bank to pay say rupees 50,000 to B. All right, this is how a check scenario works. Okay, so it is a type of bill of exchange itself. So who is A? A is the drawer, correct? Okay, HDFC Bank is the drawee, and it will also become the payer. Okay, who is B? B is the payee. That is the final amount will be paid to B. All right, so this is how the mechanism of a check works. Okay, so to understand, a check is a bill of exchange which is drawn upon a specified banker, and it is always payable on demand. It means that whenever let's say for example B goes and presents the check to his bank. All right, so that is the demand that B is creating. Okay, so upon that demand, HDFC Bank will transfer the amount to B's bank account. Okay, the expanded definition, it includes your electronic check as well as a truncated check. So electronic check, as the name suggests, is an online mode of check. Okay, truncated check is where you convert a physical check into electronic form by taking a photograph of it. All right, so truncated check is the conversion of a physical check into an electronic one by means of clicking a picture of it. Okay, electronic terms, electronic check is of course your digitally signed. Yes, can you physically sign an e-check? No, it is always has to be digitally signed. Truncated check is physical check which is converted to image. So it was physical earlier, but now it is an image form. Clearing house is managed or recognized by the RBI. A clearing house is basically the person, the institution or organization which clears your check. All right, so I hope you are clear with the concept of check and how it is defined in your Negotiable Instruments Act. Okay, the nature of check, there are two conditions. So something that is already there in the meaning is a condition here. So firstly, it is drawn on your banker and is always payable on demand. Okay, it must satisfy all your requirements of your bill, right? One thing which it does not have to satisfy is acceptance. Okay, so your bank. Okay, bank is who? Bank is your drawee or your payer, correct? In this case, there is no acceptance required. Okay, no acceptance required. That is, let's say, for example, you are issuing a check in favor of B, your supplier. Okay, if you are issuing a check, do you wait for the bank to accept that? No. Right? Do you wait for the bank to accept that? No. It is understood that based on your directions, the bank will have to pay that certain sum of money to say B. All right. So this is the only way in which it differs from your bill of exchange. That is, no acceptance is required. All right. The important rule is that only check can be payable to bearer on your demand. Okay, who is bearer? So we understood two things. We had order and we had bearer. Okay, bearer is basically the holder, correct? Bearer is basically the holder, and order is when there is a specific person involved. Okay, when there is a specific person involved. Next, parties to the check, the drawer, the person who is issuing the check. In our case, it is A. Okay, drawee is the banker. In our case, it was HDFC Bank. Okay, payee is B. Holder is the person who holds this. In this case, it is going to be B. Okay, let's say, for example, B endorses it in favor of C. So B becomes the endorser, C becomes the endorsee, and later C also becomes the holder of the check. All right, so this is how you understand the different parties that are there to your check. All right. Now, what are your various essentials? Okay, very, very important. It is a bill of exchange which is always drawn upon banker, always payable on demand, no acceptance is required. Drawer must have a bank account, right? This is pretty self-explanatory. That is, you are drawing a check on a banker, right? What is the primary requirement of that? That you have an account with that bank. Okay, it can be payable to the drawer himself. You also issue self checks. Okay, you also issue self checks. Let's say, for example, if you want to withdraw a certain sum of money, all right, in that case, you can write a check to self, okay, saying to self or to a bearer. That is, you can leave the check blank as well. Okay, you can leave the check blank as well. That is, you need not mention the name of the payee, and that will be completely valid. Okay, your banker is liable only to your drawer. Okay, your banker is liable to whom? To you, the person who has the bank account and is ordering payment. All right, is the banker liable to the payee? No, you will be liable to the payee. Banker will be liable only to the drawer. It is valid for 3 months. Post this, okay, post 3 months, it becomes a stale check. what does it become? It becomes a stale check. Okay, so the validity of your check is going to be 3 months. Post the period of 3 months, it is going to become a stale check. Okay, and there is no stamping that is required. All right, we saw in the case of your promissory note, your stamp was required, but in this case, no stamp is required. What is required in that place? Signature is a must. Okay, signature is a must. And whose signature are we speaking about here? We are speaking about the drawer's signature. So the person who has the bank account and is issuing the check, their signature will be of utmost importance here. All right. Next, let us differentiate between your check versus bill of exchange. Although check is a type of bill of exchange, let's understand the key differences here. Okay, your check is always drawn on your banker, bill of exchange is drawn on any person. Okay, payment is on demand only. Payment is on demand or a future time. That is, in your bill of exchange, you can add a specific future date. Okay, let's say, for example, I am making this payment on the 1st of April 2026. That is going to be all right. Your check also has to be dated, but it is only the date that you are issuing the check. Okay, date only that you are issuing the check. From that date for up to 3 months, the check is valid and can be presented for payment at any point of time. Okay. Acceptance is not required in check. Why? Because your banker has a responsibility to follow your directions. Okay. Acceptance is required in case of your bill of exchange. Grace period, there is no grace period. Here there is a 3 days grace period. We will be understanding this concept in detail a little later in the chapter. Dishonor, your notice is not required. Here, your notice is required. Okay. Revocation can be countermanded. However, your bill of exchange cannot be revoked. Okay. Crossing can be crossed. Here, it cannot be crossed. So, grace period and crossing is something that we'll be understanding in detail a little later. Okay. So, all checks are bill of exchanges. Why? Because it is a bill of exchange drawn on a banker. All bills are not checks. Why? Because bills may be drawn on any person apart from a banker as well. All right. Next, now we have come across the concept of your banker time and again, right? So who exactly is your banker? Okay, before we understand this, let's go back to the module and complete the concept of your check. Okay, so we understood a bank draft. We understood the bank draft to begin with. Okay, so it is a bill of exchange, is drawn by whom? Okay, so bank draft is drawn by your banker. Okay, your check is drawn upon a banker. Okay, it is drawn upon the banker. Okay, so please make sure that you are understanding these differences. That is, your bank draft is drawn by the banker, your check is drawn upon the banker. Okay, so your bank draft, okay, your bank draft is a bill of exchange which is drawn by one bank on another bank or by itself on its own branch. Okay, either it is on another bank or is it on its own branch. Okay, and it is a negotiable instrument. It is very much like the check with 3 points of distinction between the two. A bank draft can be drawn only by a bank on another bank, usually its own branch. Okay, it cannot so easily be countermanded. It cannot be made payable to the bearer as well. Okay, but we saw that their usage is less frequent, but it is still legally valid under your Negotiable Instruments Act. Okay, next we move on to the specimen of a bank draft. Okay, so this is the bank. Okay, and this is the branch. Okay, so you write the bank draft number and the date. On demand, pay A or order the sum of rupees 1,500 only. Okay, so you write 1,500, the bank manager signs here. To B, okay, the branch. In the above demand draft, the drawer is the XYZ branch and the drawee is B and the payee is A. All right, that is, this bank is drawing upon B to pay A. All right, so ABC bank. So ABC Bank, specifically the XYZ branch, is directing, okay, is directing B to pay rupees 1,500 to whom? To A. Okay, so 1,500 to A. All right, so I hope you are clear with this. So please refer to your modules wherein you'll get the specimen of all of these negotiable instruments. All right. Next is the concept of your check. That is the Negotiable Instrument Amendments and Miscellaneous Provision Act of 2002. All right. What did we understand about amendments? So when we started off this chapter, that is for your law, we understood that once an act is passed, if there is a change that has come into place, you don't need to revoke the act entirely and issue a new act. You can always have your amendment acts, okay, wherein you are notifying any changes to the act that you wish to make. All right. So here in this case, via both of these amendment acts, your definition of check has been broadened to include what? Your electronic image or a truncated check and a check in your electronic form. Okay. So what is your check. So as per section 6 of the act, your check is a bill of exchange. Okay, please understand that the check is a type of bill of exchange itself, which is drawn upon a specified banker, okay, and not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. So what are the two primary conditions of the check? It has to be drawn upon a banker and it has to be payable on demand only. All right, and it includes truncated check and a check in your electronic form. Okay, so as per the explanation, okay, as per the explanation, this is something which is very important. A check in electronic form, okay, is a check which is drawn in electronic form by using any computer resource and signed in a secured system with what? With your digital signature and asymmetric crypto system or with electronic signature. All right, what is your truncated check? Okay, it is a check which is truncated during the course of a clearing cycle, okay, either by the clearing house or by the bank, whether paying or receiving payment immediately on generation of an electronic image for transmission, substituting the further physical movement. Okay, so instead of handing over the check physically, you are resorting to an electronic mode by capturing an image of your truncated check. Okay, so clearing house is the one which is managed by your RBI. Okay, so check is a bill of exchange which is drawn on a bank payable always on demand. Okay, two additional qualifications: it is has to be drawn on a banker only, and it has to be payable on demand always. All right, a check being a species of your bill of exchange must satisfy all requirements of the bill. The only difference is that it does not require your acceptance. By virtue of Section 31 of your Reserve Bank of India Act, no bill of exchange or hundi can be made payable to bearer on demand, and no promissory note or bank draft can be made payable to a bearer at all. All right. Next, your parties to the check. We have your three parties: drawer being the person, drawee being the bank, payee become the person to whom it has to be paid, holder is the one who's holding. Mostly these both are the same. All right. Endorser is the person who has endorsed it, and endorsee is the person in whose name it has been endorsed to. Okay, essentials always drawn on banker. It is payable on your demand. No acceptance is required. Okay, it can be drawn on a bank where the drawer has an account. All right, then it may be payable to the drawer himself or it may be payable to the bearer on your demand. Okay, next. The banker is liable only to the drawer. Okay, banker liable to the drawee? No. A check is valid for the period of 3 months. Post this, it becomes your antedated, post-dated, or also known as your stale check. Okay, antedated, post-dated, or also known as your stale check. No stamp is required to be affixed on your checks, whereas what is important, your signature is something which is very important. Okay, distinction between your check and your bill of exchange. So as a general rule, the provisions apply similarly. What is the difference? Check and bill of exchange. Time and again, we've been understanding your check is drawn upon by a banker. Okay, bill may be drawn on anyone, including the banker. So you can always draw bill of exchange on your banker, but by default, your check is drawn upon on a banker. Okay, check is only payable on demand. Bill is demand or a future date. Okay, bill after sight must be accepted. Check, there's no requirement of acceptance. There's a grace period for bill, but no grace period in case of your check. Okay, a drawer of a bill is discharged if it is not presented for payment, but the drawer of a check is discharged only if he suffers any damage by delay in presentation of payment. Okay, what does this mean? Let's say, for example, you have drawn a check upon your banker to pay, say, be a certain sum of money. Okay, and the check had to be say presented by 31st of March. Okay, your 3 months ended on 31st of March, but B has gone and presented it for payment on 10th of April. All right, that is the only case will be where your payment will not be paid to B by, because it becomes a post dated or an antedated check. It is stale, that is you should have presented it within 3 months itself. Notice of the dishonor of a bill is necessary, but not in case of your check. All right, a check being a revocable mandate, the authority may be revoked by countermanding your payment and is determined by notice of the customer's death or insolvency. Okay, a check may be crossed but not a bill. So we will also get to understanding the crossing of a check. Okay, a check is a bill of exchange drawn on a specified banker, always payable on demand. This is exactly the meaning of check that you need to remember, that it is a bill of exchange which is drawn upon a specified banker and it is always payable on demand. Okay, always drawn on a particular banker and is always payable on demand. Consecutively, all checks are bill of exchanges, but all bills are not checks. This is one of the most important topics you need to understand. Okay, then we have a specimen of a check here, wherein you are drawing it upon this branch saying branch of your bank, saying pay A rupees so and so on this date. You write your account number, the LF number, your number, how much amount is it, and your sign here. All right. So I hope you are clear with all of these topics. All right. Now we will move on to the next topic, which is going to be that of your banker. Kindly allow me just 1 minute before we proceed. All right, let's proceed with the next one, which is your banker. Okay, so we've been time and again explaining the concept that your check has to be drawn upon a banker. Okay, so who exactly is your banker? So banker is someone who does your banking business. Okay, banker is someone who does your banking business. Okay, so as per your Banking Regulation Act of 1949, what is the business of banking? Okay, business of banking is accepting deposits from public for lending or investment, repayable on demand, withdrawable by check, draft, etc. Okay, so let's say for example what happens. Okay, let's say for example you have the public in general and then you have the bank. Okay, let's say now, have you heard about the concept of your deposits? Yes. All right, what happens in deposits? So let's say for example you as a person have saved up certain money. All right, you do not want to be spending it. Okay, so what do? You deposit the money with bank. Okay, you deposit the money with your bank and your bank in turn pays certain rate of interest to you. Why? Because you are keeping your money with the bank. What will the bank do with this? The bank will invest it further. Okay, so let's say for example the bank pays you a rate of interest of say 4%. Okay, it must be getting a rate 7% anywhere. So the difference between these two is how the bank earns. All right. So this is the case when your public has your surplus money. That is when it is depositing the money with the bank. What happens when your public needs money? Okay. So in that case, when your public needs money, okay, it borrows from your bank. It borrows from your bank. Okay. And the bank charges certain rate of interest. Okay, where do you think this money that the public is borrowing from the bank, where is the bank getting that money from the deposits that the bank is accepting? So what happens, the customers who have excess or surplus funds available, they deposit that with the bank. All right, and the bank will then lend those funds to someone who is in need, and whatever excess funds the bank have, they will invest it further to earn better rate of interest. All right, so now accepting deposits. Okay, so the bank is accepting deposit for the purpose of what? For the purpose of lending. Okay, and it is repayable on demand. Okay, let's say for example I have deposited the money in my current account. All right, I can withdraw the money at any given point of time. That is either on demand or otherwise. Or let's say my fixed deposit is for a fixed period of 2 years. Okay, then in that case at the end of that 2 years I'm going to withdraw that amount. Okay, and how can I withdraw it? It can be either by your check, a draft, etc. Okay, key points of banking. Primary function is accepting deposit and using that for lending. Okay, deposits are repayable on demand or agreement. Okay, deposits are repayable on your demand or agreement. Withdrawal is via check or your draft. No verbal withdrawal. Why? Because you need to present a document saying this is how you are going to withdraw the check. All right. Next, Who is a customer? Now, if there's a banker, of course, there has to be a customer. So, like how your banking was defined in your Banking Regulation Act, your customer is not defined anywhere, okay? But in general sense, your customer is a person who has an account with the bank and uses bank services. In our check, okay, in our essentials, we saw that the person who is drawing a check needs to have a bank account, right? Why? Because you're drawing a check upon the banker. So, your primary requirement is that the customer should have a bank account, all right? Next, now let's understand the banker customer relationship. Okay, obligation of your banker. So if you are a banker, what is your responsibility? First one is the honor the customer's check. That is, let's say for example, I have issued a check to B, all right, saying pay 5,000 rupees. Okay, so my bank will have to honor that check, deduct 5,000 rupees from my account and transfer it to B's account. Okay, collect check or draft if someone has issued a check to me. Okay, if someone has issued a check to me, say B has paid in favor of A, okay, and if I present that check to the bank, they will have to collect it, okay, and they will either have to pay it to me in cash or they can deposit it in my bank account as well. Maintain proper records, all right. So at any given point of time, you see, if you request for a bank statement, okay, if you request for a bank statement, you will get a record of all the transactions that you have done with the bank account. Let's say if you have withdrawn money from your ATM, you have transferred money, you have received money, all of that is a record that is maintained by your bank and it can be given to you in the form of a bank statement, all right. Follow the customer's instructions, okay. Let's say you can give certain mandates to the bank. Okay, let's say for example, if you are investing by way of SIPs in your mutual fund, okay, SIPs in your mutual fund, wherein you are telling you have authorized your bank to invest rupees 25,000 in a particular fund, okay. So the bank will not come back to you for signatures or approval every time. Once you have set the mandate, it will automatically deduct and pay rupees 25,000 at say the 10th of every month in the mutual fund that you have selected, okay. So these are certain customer instructions that bank will follow, all right. Or let's say for example, you have automated your say Netflix subscription for example, or Google Pay for example, right? What happens? You set a mandate, so your Google Pay does not ask you for your permission every single time. Every time the month begins, your Netflix payment is cut off, or even your Google Pay, say if you have subscribed to more storage on your Google, those amounts will cut off. So these are mandates that the customer has sent, that is the bank's responsibility to follow, okay. Maintain your confidentiality, that is, bank will not disclose any of your bank account related information to any other customer, okay. Let's say for example, you want to find out how much bank balance your friend has. Do you think your friend's bank will reveal that to you? No. Why? Because bank is bound by the concept of your confidentiality. And give notice before closing of your account, okay. If say your account has been defunct for a very long period of time, the bank will tend to close it, but before it is doing so, it needs to give you a notice that we are proceeding with the closure of your account, all right. Next, rights of a banker, okay. Rights of a banker. Right of lien over goods or securities. What is lien? Right to retain, okay, right to retain, okay, over goods or securities. What happens? Let's say for example, you have borrowed money from bank, okay, you have borrowed your money from your bank, okay, and you have given gold as security, okay, gold as security, all right. In that case, what happens? If you fail to repay this amount, your bank has a lien over your gold, okay. Your bank has lien over your gold. That is, if you fail to repay this amount, the bank has all rights to retain this gold, sell it, and from that proceeds pay off your loan, all right. Right of set off and appropriation, okay. Right of set off and appropriation. Let's say for example, if one party owes say 10,000 to the other and the other parties owe you 3,000, so it can set off and finally pay rupees 7,000 to the other party, okay. Right to charges and interest, okay. How do you think the bank earns? Okay, what is the primary mode of revenue for your bank? It is the interest, okay. So if you are borrowing money, okay, let's say for example, if you have borrowed 1 lakh rupees, you will have to repay 1 lakh rupees plus say a certain rate of interest. Let's say it is say 7%, all right. So how much? 7,000 rupees will be the rate of interest that you are paying to the bank, all right. Next, what is the liability of your banker? The banker becomes the debtor of the customer, correct? It must honor check if sufficient funds are available. If unjustified refusal, liable for damages, okay? So there are two cases here. Let's say, for example, you have issued a check for rupees 50,000, okay? issued a check for rupees 50,000. Now, if your bank balance is say 25,000, do you think the bank will be able to pay it? No. Then what is it going to do? It is going to dishonor your check. So I'm pretty sure you would have heard about the concept of your bouncing of check. All right. It means that you issued a check, but when your bank proceeded with the payment, it was known that there's no sufficient balance. Okay. But let's say, for example, you had a bank balance of say 75,000. Okay, let's say you had a bank balance of 70,000, 75,000, and still your bank has refused. Is there any justification for this refusal? No. Why? Because you had 75,000, you were supposed to pay 50,000, but you did not pay it, right? So that is an unjustified refusal and you will be liable for damages. Why? Because you were liable to the payee to pay that amount and you did not pay. So the loss that you have suffered along with the money that is to be paid, the bank will be liable. Okay. Bank again is liable only towards your drawer. It has no, your payer holder has no right against the banker. So whose bank is it? It is the drawer's bank, right? So the banker will be liable only to the drawer and not the drawee. Who will be liable to the, who will be liable to the payee? It will be the drawer who will be liable to the payee. All right. Next, duties in handling checks. Again, maintain your accurate accounts and honor your check presented in due course. Okay. What is due course? That is all of your requirements are followed. Okay. Anything in due courses, all of your requirements are followed. Okay. Making the right payment to the right person at the right time. Okay. So when we are saying due course, okay, right payment to right person at the right time. Okay. Now, why are we saying right payment? That is, if my check says 5,000 rupees, the bank has to make sure that it is transferring 5,000 rupees only. It cannot transfer any other sum of money. To right person, if I have issued it in favor of B, they will have to issue it to B only, no one else. Okay. At the right time, again, you have a 3 months time period to present your check. So at the right time, the payment has to be done. If all of these are satisfied, then the payment will set to be in due course. Okay. Now, when must the bank refuse payment? All right, please understand that there is the word must here, which means that in these cases, compulsorily the bank will have to refuse your payment. Okay, so the first one is countermanding or stop payment by your customer. Okay, let's say for example your customer itself has given a written notice to the bank saying please do not proceed with this payment. Then the bank has no option there. Bank cannot choose to pay or not to pay. The bank will have to compulsorily follow the countermand demand of your customer. Okay, notice of death of the customer. Now the account belongs to whom? The account belongs to the customer. So upon the death of the customer, the bank must refuse the payment. All right. Why? Because the customer before their death had authorized that payment. But because the customer is no more, you will have to stop all the payments in the name of the customer. Declared insolvent. What happens in your insolvency? You do not have sufficient assets to pay off your liabilities. All right. So the bank will freeze your account and only as required as post your insolvency, the bank will make the payment. But any other payments, the bank will have to refuse. Okay. Notice of insanity. Again, the customer is not of sound mind. What do you think this reminds you of? This is nothing but your competency to contract. Okay, competency to contract. Okay. Next is your court order. So if there's a garnishee order saying please freeze the bank account of this person and there will be no transactions happening, then in that case your court order will come into picture. Okay, let's say a person is trying to flee the country. Okay, so the court will order the bank to freeze all of its payments. Okay, notice of assignment of your account balance. Okay, that is, let's say for the example, the person has assigned the entire balance available to their kids. Okay, then in that case, in the person's name, no payments will have to be done. Defective title of the holder. Okay, the person very well knows that the check, okay, let's say for example there is a check but the holder does not have title to it and the banker knows of it, then the banker should refuse the payment. And notice of closure of account, very much understood. So just like how to issue a check, you need to have a bank account. When you don't have a bank account, that is when you're closing your bank account, no further payments should be encouraged by the bank. All right, so these are scenarios where it is important that it is a must and should that your banker should refuse your payment. All right, Next up is when your banker may refuse the payment. Okay, banker may refuse the payment. In the previous cases, it was cases where the banker should refuse the payment. Here is where the banker may refuse the payment. Okay, so the banks have specific protocols and regulations governing check clearance. All right, now key reasons for refusal. Now, may is your voluntary refusal. Okay, at the discretion of the banker. Okay, it is at the discretion of the banker that this refusal will take place. Okay, what are the key reasons? Post dated check, okay, issued with a future date, not yet valid for the payment. All right, so it is not yet valid. It is at the discretion of the bank whether it wants to go ahead with the check or not. Okay, insufficient funds. Okay, now naturally the bank will reject, but let's say there's an overdraft facility that is available. Okay, overdraft. So let's say what happens in case of your overdraft is your balance is rupees 1 lakh. Okay, but let's say you have been the customer with a bank for too long with a good credit score and good clearance. Okay, bank will allow you to say withdraw an additional amount. Okay, that is, let's say 1.2 lakhs. Okay, so that extra 20,000 is your OD or your overdraft facility. Okay, so if there are insufficient funds but you are able to issue a check under overdraft facility, the bank may go ahead. But if there is no overdraft facility, the bank may refuse the payment. Okay, doubtful legality. The check's purpose or issuance is legally questionable. All right, legally questionable. If the bank notices that the check is not legal, then in that case they may reject the payment. Not duly presented outside of banking hours or to the wrong branch, right? So if you visit a bank, you will see that 9 to 3 or 9 to 4 is usually the time for your bank's working, right? So anything post that, let's say you have gone at say 5:30 where the bank is not working. All right, so that is not duly presented. That is, you have not presented as per the rules that are applicable. Okay, it is irregular, ambiguous, or altered. Okay, let's say for example you have paid for 5,000. Okay, but you wanted to make it 6,000, so you have just scratched off the 5 and written 6. That will be altered. Okay, what can you do? Once you have scratched off, you'll have to just initial it saying I am the person who has scratched it off. Okay, no account exists. Very naturally, if no account exists, where in that case how will your bank make the payment? Okay, joint account issue. Let's say the account is owned by both husband and the wife. It is joint account and your account clearly states that you require both the signatures, but say only the wife has signed, right? Then the bank may refuse the payment stating that your account requires signature of both the people. Okay, then you have a stale check which is presented more than 6 months after its issue date. All right, so I hope you are clear between the scenarios where a bank should definitely refuse the payment and where the bank can voluntarily refuse your payment. All right. Yes, now let's just quickly go back to the module wherein we'll understand all of these topics. Okay, so who is a banker? The one who does your banking business. What is your banking business? It is accepting for the purpose of lending or investment. Accepting what? Deposits of money from the public, repayable on demand or otherwise. Okay, this definition emphasizes your 2 points. Okay, first one is accepting deposits, that is for the purpose of lending. All right, and that the amount deposited is repayable to the depositor on demand or according to the agreement. Okay, who is a customer? It is defined nowhere, but by means of practice, it is understood that it is someone who has an account with bank or utilizes service of the bank. Okay, then we understood the different obligations of the banker. Okay, honor check, collect check, keep proper records. Okay, standing instructions not to disclose, that is maintain confidentiality, give reasonable notice in case of what? Closure, right of lien of every goods, set off and right of appropriation, right to claim incidental charges as per the rules and regulations of the bank. Okay, next is your liability. Okay, what is your liability? That is, the banker becomes liable to his debtor to the extent of the amount so received in the said account and undertakes to honor the checks which are drawn. Okay, if the bank by without justification fails to honor, he is liable to compensate the drawer for any loss. Okay, now, one more very important thing is honoring of check will happen what? When there is sufficient funds to the customer's credit. All right, but the payee or holder of the check has no cause of action against the banker, as the obligation to honor the check is only towards your banker. Okay, the banker must also maintain proper and accurate accounts of credits and debits. Okay, so the bank statement that I was talking about, this is the record which makes sure that all of the transactions, whether there are any incoming or outgoing transactions, will be recorded by the bank. Okay, honor a check presented in due course. Due course is just the right person at the right time and right payment to them. Okay, when should a banker refuse your payment? That is when it should, when it must. Okay, when a customer itself gives a written notice, okay, saying do not make the payment, okay. Customer's death, insolvency, insanity, garnishee order, wherein your court itself is freezing your bank account, okay. Then there's a notice of assignment of the credit balance, holder's title is defective, and the customer has given a notice for closing his account, okay. And when do you think a banker may refuse payment? That is at the option of the banker. When do you think the refusal is okay? Okay, in cases where the check is your post dated, okay, when banker has no sufficient funds, doubtful legality, not duly presented, check is irregular, that let's say it was torn or it had scratches over it, when someone has joint account and only one of them has signed, okay, when check is allowed to become stale, that is 6 months post the date mentioned to it. All right, so I hope you are clear with all of the topics that we've discussed today, okay, starting with your bank draft, followed by your check, your differences between your bill of exchange, your check, who is your banker and who is your customer. All right, so we are almost 1 hour past today's class, so let's quickly take a 5 to 10 minutes break and come back, where we will start with the next topic, which is your protection of your paying banker. All right, so I will see you all in the next 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, great. Let's start off with the next topic, which is our protection of paying banker. All right. So now we have understood the concept of your banker. All right. Now, when is your paying banker protected? Okay. Firstly, who is your paying banker? Now we've understood who the banker is, right? Now let us understand who is your paying banker. All right. Paying banker is your banker on whom the check is drawn and the one who will have to make the payment. All right. So the first one is payment to order check. Okay. So if the banker is said to have discharged payment if the payment is made to in due course or the check is payable to order. All right. What is due course? We will be understanding this topic a little in detail later. But for now, to be able to understand, that is the right person at the right time. Okay. Now it is valid even if endorsement is later found you're forged and unauthorized. That is, if your banker has taken all the measures to make sure that your check is entirely valid, then that is said to be a payment in due course. Okay. Your payee also includes your endorsee. All right. What does this mean? Let's say, for example, A has issued a check to B, okay, in favor of B upon his HDFC bank, okay. B is the payee, correct? A is the drawer, your HDFC bank is the payer, and B is the payee, okay. Let's say B endorsed it to C. So B becomes the endorser, C becomes the endorsee, and C also becomes the payee. So that is what this line means when we are saying that payee includes your endorsee. And the reason is that banker cannot know signature of all persons, only your customers, okay. That is, let's say for the example, if the endorser's signature was forged, okay, the bank will not be liable. Why? Because the endorser is not the bank's customer. Who is the bank's customer? Only your drawer, okay. Who is your bank's customer? Only your drawer is the bank's customer, okay. So banker will of course know their customer's signature, all right. So it is the bank's responsibility to check that signature. But will the bank know the endorser signature? Maybe not. Why? Because the endorser may not be the customer of the bank, okay. So the bank will be protected in that case if the endorser signature was forged, okay. Forged drawer signature, okay. Banker is not protected. Why? Because drawer signature the bank is supposed to know. Why? Because it is the bank's customer itself. So whenever you are opening a bank account, right, you also lodge your sign there. That is, bank will verify your signature against any authorizations that you have given to the bank. If you're issuing a check, your sign in the check will be compared to the sign with the bank account, all right. Exception is if the customer's negligence caused loss, okay. So now forged signature, that is that of the drawer, banker will not be protected. Banker will be liable. But forged signature of endorser, banker will be protected. Banker will not be liable. Okay. Your bearer check rules. Okay. Bearer check is once a bearer, always will be a bearer. That is, banker can ignore endorsements on a bearer check. Okay. Check becoming bearer by blank endorsement is not covered in this case. Okay. So once a bearer check, it will always be a bearer check. That is, you cannot make a bearer check a order check, all right. But if a regular check has become bearer by a blank endorsement, your bank is not covered, okay. Cross check protection. What is your cross check? So crossing is like, let's say for example, this is your check, okay. So drawing two parallel lines on the corner of the check is known as crossing. Why is that done? Then the check will not be payable over counter. That is, the bank will not be able to give you cash for that check. It will only be able to deposit that money into your bank account, okay, if the check is crossed, okay. So in crossed check, if the banker has made the payment in due course, the bank will be protected. And in case of electronic checks, your additional diligence is required. How is your additional diligence required, right? Whether it is on the correct date, right? You will have timestamps in case of your electronic transactions. You will have your digital signature, whether there is a valid digital signature or not. So in addition to your regular checks, your electronic checks are going to have additional checks in place, all right? So this is how your paying banker is protected. If the customer, that is the drawer signature, is forged, do you think the banker is protected? No. But if the endorser signature is forged, do you think the bank is protected? Yes, okay. And even in case of your cross check, if the check is crossed and the payment is made in due course, your bank is going to be protected, all right. Next, payment in due course. Okay, this is what we have been understanding time and again. Payment in due course. It is basically payment must be made as per apparent tenure of the instrument in good faith without negligence to the person in possession entitled to receive. Okay, this can either be two people. It can either be your payee or it can also be your endorsee. Okay, it can be your payee. That is whoever is entitled to receive. Result is valid discharge of liability. That is, if the banker has done the payment in due course, the banker will be no longer liable for anything else. All right. As per apparent tenor of instrument, in good faith without negligence. What do you mean? That the banker has made sure that they have done all of the checks that are required, right? What are the checks? Firstly, the customer's signature. Okay. Customer signature is there. Okay. There is sufficient balance. Okay, sufficient balance. If it is a joint account, are all the joint holders signature there? All right, that is, bank has made sure that it has taken all precautions from its end. Okay, all the required checks are done from the bank's end before it has actually proceeded with making the payment. And if it has done so, then the banker will be protected from any future liability. All right, without negligence. Okay, what could be negligence? The bank has not checked if the say amount in words is matching the amount in numbers. Okay, let's say for example, whenever you see a check, you will see that you would have written the amount in words as well as in figures as well, right? So it is the banker's basic responsibility to check if those amounts are matching. Okay, if the signature is matching, if the customer's account is still in existence or not. Okay, so if say any of this is not satisfied, then the banker would have said to have dealt with it in negligence. All right. Next, payment in due course. What are the conditions? That is as per the tenor of the instrument. That is as written on the face of the instrument. What do you think is written? Whom it is being paid to? What is the check's date? What is the amount that is being paid for? Okay. Made in good faith and without negligence. That is, it is made sure that the banker is in good faith, right? Like let's say for example, if the signature is forged very obviously, the bank still goes ahead and makes the payment. That is in negligence. Okay. But let's say if the endorser's signature is forged and the bank believes that it is the endorser's signature, then it is said to be made in good faith. Okay, no reason to doubt the entitlement of the receiver. Okay, let's say for example, on your check you have written to B. Okay, let's say 2B. Okay, but let's say someone has scratched it off and written C. Okay, do you think the bank should go ahead with this payment? No, because there is a doubtful that the C is actually entitled to receive this amount. Why so? Because B's name is scratched off and C's name is written here. Okay, so it may so happen that someone has actually scratched off the name and written a new name, right? Which means that C may not be entitled to receive it. So anytime there is a doubt on the entitlement of the receiver, the bank may not proceed with the payment. Okay, made to person in possession entitled as the holder. So it could be either your payee or your endorsee. No reasonable ground to believe otherwise, right? Now let's say for example, this is a reasonable ground to believe that maybe C is not the receiver. Okay, the sign is not matching. It is a reasonable ground to believe that the drawer is actually not signed. Okay, payment in money only. Okay, when these conditions are satisfied, the payment has significant implications. That is, valid discharge of liability. That is, your banker will be discharged. Okay, your banker will be discharged. Nobody can hold the banker liable. Okay, and the banker is also protected. So the banker is discharged of its liability and the banker is also protected from any future liabilities. All right, I hope you are clear with the concept of your payment in due course. Next is your collecting banker. Okay, who is your collecting banker? Now we understood who is the paying banker, who is the collecting banker. So collecting banker acts on behalf of their customer to process the checks. Okay, so this role comes in with specific responsibilities, particularly validity of instruments. Okay, that is, who is a collecting banker? We understood paying banker is the banker who is liable to make the payment to the drawee. Okay, sorry, to the payee. All right, collecting banker is the one who collects the checks. Okay, that is one who collects the checks and they must collect only cross checks through the banker. Okay, what is cross check? So cross checks. Okay, what is cross check? So cross check is not payable on counter. Okay, cross checks is not payable on counter. They are going to be payable only to the bank account. Okay, so you should make sure that if there are any cross checks, they should be payable through the banker itself. And this is the responsibility of whom? It is the responsibility of your collecting banker. All right. Next, what is the next condition here? Just a second. Yeah, inherent risk. That is, risks may collect check with a defective title. The true owner can sue for your conversion. So basically, the bank account in whose the bank in whose account the customer is entitled to receive the money will become your collective banker. Okay, banker is not expected to verify all your endorsement. Expected to know only your customer's signature. So that is something that we have seen time and again, that banker is not expected to know everyone's signature. Banker is expected to know only their customer's signature. All right. One of the most important key, banker will not be liable for knowing everyone's or say the endorser's signature. They will be liable for only knowing their customers. That is people who have the account with the bank, their signatures will be registered and it is expected of the bank to know their signatures. All right. Next is your protection under section 131. That is protection if the banker has acted in good faith without negligence. He collects a cross check, collects for the customers and acts as an agent. Okay. Very, very important. All right. Let's say for example, A issues a check to B. Okay. And B has an account with say ICICI Bank. Okay. So ICICI Bank becomes your collective banker. Okay. So they have collected a cross check and deposited the money in B's account. They collect for their customer. Who is their customer? B is their customer. Okay. And acts as an agent, not a holder for value. That is, B is merely collecting the amount from A's banker and depositing it. Sorry, ICICI Bank is merely collecting amount from A's account and depositing it into B's account. All right. ICICI Bank will get nothing out of this whole transaction. That is, it is merely an agent who holds the amount from your customer's behalf. Okay. Additional consideration, that is credit before realization is not holder for value. Okay. Let's say for example, if the amount is credited beforehand itself, before even A has made the payment, it will not mean that ICICI Bank is now the owner of this money. Okay. Any bank who is collecting and making payments on behalf of the customer, they are only doing through in the capacity of an agent. Okay. So it is just an agency that is set up between the customer and the bank, wherein the bank will receive the money on behalf of the customer. Okay. Electronic check, duty to verify the genuineness or due diligence. How will you check whether it is time stamped properly, whether all of the signatures are there or not, or whether anybody has altered anything in the electronic check? All right. So I hope you are clear with the concept of your paying banker, how their paying banker is protected, as well as your collecting banker and how your collecting banker is protected. All right. Next, how do you think your protection will come into place? That is, again, every time the banker is protected, if they have acted in good faith and without any negligence. Okay, the check must be crossed. Okay, we will be understanding the concept of crossing in detail. Collection is for their customer only and acts only as an agent. Okay, this is something that we've just studied here. Okay, so acted only as an agent, and very important, not your holder for value. Okay, not your holder for value. Okay, and no protection is amount is withdrawn before your realization and used to reduce overdraft. Okay, so these are cases wherein your customer has to authorize this, but if you do so without the customer's authority and you withdraw the amount before it is actually realized, or if you use it to reduce overdraft. Okay, so we saw what is this is basically set off. So when we saw the bank's rights, we saw that there's a right to set off an appropriation as well, right? So if any of this is done, then in that case, the banker will not be protected, okay? So there is no protection if your amount is withdrawn before realization and if it is used to reduce your overdraft, all right? I hope you are clear with the concept of your collecting banker and the requisites for protection. Whenever we are speaking about protection, your good faith and no negligence come into picture. Okay, good faith and no negligence are extremely important. All right, next, overdue or stale checks. Okay, overdue or stale checks. Now let us understand all of these one by one. Okay, kindly just allow me a moment, please. Yeah, overdue or stale checks, statute bar. Okay, check becomes statute bar after your 3 years. Okay, that is you cannot present it. So by default, your stale check is what? One which is not presented within 6 months. Delay causing loss, draw or discharge to that extent. Okay, that is, let's say for example, A has issued a check drawn upon its bank, HDFC Bank, in favor of B. Okay, and B has not presented it in within 6 months. Then A will be discharged. Okay, A will be discharged to what extent? To the extent that B has suffered loss because of presenting it after this period of 6 months. So as a payee, it is your responsibility to present the check for payment within a period of 6 months. Okay, and when does the law bar it? The law bars it after a period of 3 years. Okay, so when it comes to the concept of your stale, it is 6 months, and when it comes to your concept of being barred by law, it is your 3 years. Okay, next. Yes, liability of endorser. Okay, now let us understand the liability that comes in your endorsement. Okay, liability that comes in your endorsement. Okay, now let's say I hope you are clear with the concept of endorsement. Before we proceed further, let us just understand the concept once. Okay, let us just understand the concept once, wherein we'll be seeing all of the liabilities that are there. I think this topic is inserted beforehand, but since it is there, I will explain it to you. Okay, so endorsement. Let's say, for example, A issues a check. Okay, A issues a check drawn upon, okay, drawn upon HDFC Bank in favor of B. Okay, in favor of B. Okay, so who is the drawer here? A is the drawer, HDFC Bank is the drawee and the payer, and B is the payee. Okay, now let's say this check was for rupees 50,000. Okay, B also has to pay 50,000 to C. So what does B do? B will endorse it to C. Okay, so B endorses it to C. So what happens now? B becomes the endorser and C becomes the endorsee. All right. So let us quickly understand who are the parties here. Okay, so A is the drawer, correct? HDFC Bank is the drawee and the payer. Okay. And in favor of B. So B is the payee. Okay. But the minute B endorses, B becomes the endorser and C becomes your endorsee. All right. So I hope you are clear. The reason I'm giving these examples time and again is for you to understand the parties by default. All right. You do not have to necessarily memorize every parties that is there. But if you have understood the concept, then understanding and remembering your parties become easier. Okay, so liability of your endorser. Who is your endorser in this case? B. Okay, so what is B's liability? Okay, that is the check must be presented within reasonable time. Okay, so let's say same example, A to B to C. Delay by B, C can sue B but not A. Why? Because the relationship between the endorser and endorsee is between B and C. Okay, it is not between C and A. Although it is A's responsibility to pay to C, but because of B's delay, okay, if there's been a delay in endorsement and because of that, this say check has become stale, C will demand your damages only from your B and not from your A. All right. Next, rights of the holder against the banker. Okay, so the banker is liable to the customer and not the holder. All right. So in this case, let's say for example, you have A, you have its bank HDFC Bank, and B. Okay, whom is HDFC Bank liable to? HDFC Bank is liable only to A. Why? Because A is the bank's customer. Okay, A is the bank's customer. HDFC Bank will not be liable to B. Okay, very, very important to understand. HDFC Bank will not be liable to B, it will only be liable to A. Why? Because A is HDFC Bank's customer and not B. Okay. Exceptions: delay in presentation causing loss, payment of crossed check over counter. Okay. Now let's say for example, payment of cross check. What did I tell? When we say crossed check, okay, you are crossing and adding two transverse parallel lines at the corner of the check. Okay, which means that it will not be payable over counter. Okay, it will not be payable over counter, which means that the bank should not hand you physical cash for a crossed check being presented. Okay, whenever a check is crossed, the money has to be deposited into the customer's bank account only. You cannot get physical cash for it. Okay, but let's say for example, if the banker has paid a physical cash in case of a cross check, then the banker will be liable to your holder as well. All right, so the banker is liable to the holder in which two cases? In these exceptional cases, which is if there's a delay in presentation or if you have paid a cross check over your counter. All right. Next, crossing of check. Okay, now we come to the topic that we've been discussing so far, which is your crossing of check. Okay, so first you have a open check, okay, or a cross check. So your check can be open or crossed. So open check is something which is not crossed. Okay, open check is something which is not crossed, which means that it can be paid over counter. Okay, it can be paid over counter. All right, cross check here can be paid only through your banker. Okay, cross check can be only paid through banker, which means that you need to deposit that money into the banker's bank account. All right, crossing is a direction to banker to pay only to a bank or a specified banker, that is into the account of the customer. Okay, that is into the account of the customer. You cannot encash it physically. Okay, purpose is security but or traceability of payment. Okay, let's say for example, if B is the payee, B goes and presents the check for payment over the counter. It is an open check. Okay, bank is going to hand out physical cash to B. Now, this may not be recorded. Why? Because physical cash can be handed over to anyone. Let's say B authorized C to go and collect the payment on behalf, then the bank will pay it to C. Okay, but is there traceability in this case? No, because there's no record record, okay? Versus what happens when it is a cross check and B goes to present it, bank will deposit that money in B's account, and there will be a clear traceability saying from the bank account of A, A's bank has deducted the money and B's bank has collected the money on so and so date. So there is ultimate security here, and also payment is traceable. All right. Restrict your negotiability. Okay, so basically the words not negotiable or account payee only will restrict your negotiability. All right, which does not mean that you cannot transfer, which means that the transferee will not get a better title than that of the transferor. Okay, so let's say for example, if somebody without title has endorsed it, okay, then the endorsee will also get a defective title only. Okay, then you have a crossed bearer check. It is transferable by delivery. Why? Because bearer checks are transferable by delivery. Okay, so when we are speaking about transfer, okay, you have your bearer check and you have your order check. Okay, so your bearer check are transferable merely by your delivery. Okay, your order check requires endorsement plus delivery. Okay, your order check requires endorsement plus delivery both. Okay, so that is what is meant by cross check, cross bearer check being transferable only by delivery. Crossed order check is transferable by your endorsement or your delivery. All right, I hope you are clear with this topic here. Okay, so I hope you are clear with your crossing of checks, which means that drawing two transverse parallel lines at the end of the check, okay, which makes it payable only through your backup. Next, mode of crossing. Okay, how can you cross a check? So the first one is your general crossing, wherein you're drawing two parallel transverse lines like the one that we have seen, may include and co or not negotiable as well. Payment only to a banker, not counter, not negotiable is transferee gets no better title. Okay, so when we are speaking about not negotiable, okay, when we are speaking about not negotiable, it does not mean not transferable. Okay, it does not mean not transferable. It means that, okay, transferee cannot get better title than the transferor. Okay, that is, let's say for example, sometimes what happens if not negotiable is not written, if transferor has a defective title and transferee does not know it, transferee can get a good title, which means that transferee has a better title than that of the transferor. But if not negotiable is mentioned and transferor does not have good title, transferee accepts it in good faith, transferee will still not get good title. Why? Because it is a not negotiable instrument, and it means that a transferee will not get a better title. Okay, next up is your special crossing, okay, wherein a specific banker's name is mentioned. Okay, you will have your two transverse lines, but you will also have the name of the banker mentioned there. Okay, parallel lines are not necessary, payment only to that banker or its agent. Okay, account payee crossing, that is, it will be credited to the payee's account only. Collecting banker is negligent if credited elsewhere. Why? Because you have specifically mentioned that it will be paid to the account payee only, and there is no effect on your paying banker. All right, so these are the different modes of crossing that exist in your negotiable instrument act. Okay, now we come to the not negotiable crossing, which we were just discussing here. So I hope you are clear with the first three types of crossing, starting with your general crossing, your special crossing, and your account payee crossing. Okay, next, your not negotiable crossing. Okay, so what happens in this case? Your words not negotiable is added. Okay, so it does not restrict transfers, it restricts your negotiability. Please remember this very thoroughly. Not negotiability does not mean your transfer is restricted. It means that the transferee will not get a better title than the transferor. Okay, let's say for example, a stolen check is transferred to X. Okay, do you think the person who transferred it had authority? No, because why? It was stolen, so X cannot claim your better title. Okay, let's say if this not negotiable was not mentioned, then X can claim a good title. It removes the benefit of the holder in the due course. Okay, so whatever title the transferor had, the transferee will get a title only to that extent. All right, next, Key effect of not negotiable: title depends on previous holder. If a previous holder had good title, transferee will also have good title. If previous holder did not have title, transferee will also not get title. Okay, so that is, your defective title will continue in all of your transfers. It protects the true owner. Why? Because let's say, for example, A issued a check in favor of B, all right, but it got stolen and it was endorsed to C. Okay, so in that case, your B will be protected. Why? Because it was supposed to be credited in B's account and was transferee to verified title. That is, if a check has not negotiable mention, it is transferee's responsibility to make sure that the transferor has title, because if anything goes wrong, transferee will not get a better title than that of the transferor. All right, so I hope you are clear with this. Next, maturity. Okay, so now before we understand this, let us quickly go back to the module to see the topic that we have discussed so far. Okay, so now we understood your protection of your paying banker, that of your collecting banker, and the concept of crossing. Okay, so let us just understand this from the module and quickly go through everything that we've covered so far. Okay, so when we speak about the protection banker, it is your section 85. Okay, that is where a check payable to order purports to be endorsed or on behalf of the payee, the banker is discharged by your payment in due course. Okay, that is, he can debit the account of the customer with the amount even if the endorsement turns out subsequently to have been forged. Okay, that means that forged endorsement is not the responsibility of the paying banker. Why? Because it is expected to know the signature of only your customers. Okay, he is bound to know the signatures of only your customers. That is, forgery of drawer signature will not ordinarily protect the bank, but in this case the bank may debit the account of the customer if it can show that the forgery was immediately connected with the negligence. So if it is negligence of the customer, the paying banker is still going to be protected. Okay, in case of your bearer check, the rules that once a bearer check, always a bearer check, right? So a check originally expressed by the drawer himself to be payable by the bearer, the banker may ignore any endorsement. Why? Because the drawer itself had told that this check is going to be a bearer, so endorsement is not required, right? When do you think endorsements will required? Let's say, for example, A issues a check in favor of B. Okay, B is very specifically mentioned, and if B wants it to be paid to C, then your endorsement is required. But let's say A issues a blank check. Okay, the name of the person is not mentioned. Do you think endorsement is required in that case? No, because the name of the receiver is anyways not mentioned. So it, in that case, the bank can ignore any further endorsements. Okay, he will be discharged by your payment in due course, but a check which becomes bearer by a subsequent endorsement as blank is not covered by this section. Let's say earlier it was issued to B, but B endorses it in any person's name. Okay, now, in case of your electronic check, banks are required to maintain your additional diligence. Okay, payment in due course when it is on the apparent tenor of the instrument. Please remember this term, apparent tenor, like as written on the face of the instrument, you are making the payment as per that itself, in good faith, without negligence, and to any other person in the possession thereof. Okay, a payment will said to be made in due course. Okay, if it is an apparent tenor of the instrument, good faith, no negligence, person who is in possession, be it the payee or the endorsee, okay, which do not offer. So you have made it in believing that there is no ground that the receiver is not entitled to receive the payment. Payment is made in money and money only. All right. Next up is your collecting banker. All right. So collecting banker is the one who collects the proceed of a check for a customer. So basically the payees or the holder's bank is your collecting banker. Okay, negotiable instrument imposes your statutory obligation. All right, that is, your general crossing shall not be paid to anyone other than a banker, and specially crossing, that is only to that banker. Okay, what does general crossing say? You will not pay it over the counter, but in addition to that, if it's a special crossing, you will not pay it to the counter and you will pay it only to the bank whose name is mentioned in the special crossing. Okay, thus a paying banker must pay a generally crossed check only to a banker and a specially crossed check only to the specific banker. All right. Now, at the same time, it cannot be expected of a bank to know and ensure that all signatures appearing in endorsement are genuine. Okay, the bank, very, very important, bank is expected to be conversant only with the signatures of the customer. Okay, a customer to whom a check has been endorsed to would request his bank to collect a check. Okay, in the event of the endorser signature being proved to be forged, the banker who collected the proceeds should not be held liable. Why? Because it was thorough with its own customer signatures, not everyone else. Okay, very important. Just a second. Yeah. Yeah. Very important here, a banker who in good faith and without negligence received payment for a customer of a check crossed, which is generally or specially to himself, shall not, in case the title the check proves defective, incur any liability. Basically, if the bank has acted in good faith and without negligence, okay, he will not incur any liability when later the check proves to be defective. Okay. Then there's an amendment act which also mentions as per section 131 that it is the duty of the banker who receives payment based on electronic image of a truncated check to verify the prima facie genuineness of the check. Okay. To avoid any and detect any fraud, forgery or tampering. Okay. When do you think your collecting banker client claim your protection? Okay, that is they should have acted in good faith without negligence. Okay, it's in good faith when it is done honestly. Plea of good faith can be rebutted on the ground of recklessness. Okay, let's say for example you did not check the customer's signature, you did not check the amount. All right, failure to verify the regularity of endorsements, collecting a check payable to the account to the credit of the director are examples of your negligence. Okay, you have paid it to someone else. Let's say your director is of course a representative of the company, but does not mean you credit the account of the director because they are two different accounts. Okay. Banker should have collected a crossed check, okay, that the check should have been crossed before it came to him for collection. The proceeds should have been collected for the customer only. You cannot credit the account of someone who is not a customer with your bank, okay. That the collecting banker has only acted as an agent. That is, he will not become the holder for value, okay. He will not become the holder for value. He's only holding the amount on behalf of his customer, okay. Then you have the concept of your overdue, stale, or out of date check. That is, it becomes statute bar when after a period of 3 years, and it becomes stale when after a period of 6 months. Okay. Liability of endorser. Okay, it is in the correct order itself. In order to charge an endorser, it is necessary to present the check for the payment within the reasonable time. Okay. Let's say A endorses and delivers a check to B, and B keeps it for an unreasonable amount of time and delivers to C. Okay. C will, who will be liable to C? B will be liable. Do you think A will be liable to C? No. All right. Rights of the holder against the banker. That is, a banker is liable to his customer for wrongful dishonor of his check, but is not liable to the payee or the holder. Why? Because who is the customer in this case? The customer is going to be the drawer. Okay, the customer is going to be the drawer in your prima facie cases. Okay, the holder has no right to enforce payment from the banker except in two cases. Okay, where the holder himself does not present a check within a reasonable amount of time, or where a banker pays a cross check over the counter. Do you think cross checks are allowed to be paid over the counter? No, it is only to the specified bank account. Okay, then we understood the concept of your crossing of checks, wherein we saw a check can be either or crossed. Crossing, what is crossing? It is mainly a security feature. Okay, an open check can be presented by the payee and it can be paid over the counter. A cross check must be collected through a banker only. Okay, it is a direction to the paying banker to pay money generally to a bank or a particular banker. Okay, if it is generally, then it is your general crossing, and let's say it is to a particular banker, it is going to be your special crossing. All right, the object of crossing is to secure payment to a banker so that it could be traced to the person receiving the amount of the check. Okay. Crossing is a direction that the check should be paid only to a specified banker. Then we understood not negotiable or account payee as well. Okay. Then there are different modes of crossing. Okay. Wherein firstly you have your general crossing where it is addition of two parallel transverse lines and additions of the word and go between them. Okay, when it comes to your special crossing, okay, when it comes to say your special crossing, so now where a check bears across its face an addition of the name of the banker, okay, that is your special crossing. Okay, so in addition to two transverse parallel lines, if you have the name of the banker, it is your special crossing. Okay, then you have your account payees crossing wherein it restricts the negotiability of a check. That is, it wants the collecting banker. The proceeds are to be credited only to the account of the payee or the party name. So whoever's name is mentioned, you specifically need to pay it only to their account. Then we understood your not negotiable crossing, wherein a check may be crossed not negotiable by writing across the face not negotiable. What does this do? It does not restrict transferability. Okay, it does not mean that it is not transferable. It only deprives the instrument on negotiability. Okay, that is, the transferee cannot get better title than that of the transferor. Okay, this is very important for you to understand. Okay, that it is to say that the transferee cannot claim the rights of a holder in due course. goes. So as long as the title of the transfer is good, the title of the transfer is also going to be good. But if there is a taint in the title of check of one of the endorsers, then all the subsequent transferees title will also become tainted. Okay. The objective of this section is to afford protection to the drawer or holder of the check who is desirous of transferring it to other person, so that he is protected against any dishonesty. Okay. Now you have an example here which says, for example, a check payable to bearer is crossed generally and is marked not negotiable. All right. If it is lost, it is stolen or lost and comes into the possession of X, who takes it in good faith and gives value for it. X collects the check through his bank and paying banker also pays. Okay. In this case, both are protected. Why? Because they are doing it in good faith. All right. But X cannot claim that he is a holder in due course, which he could have under normal circumstances, right? Because it is not negotiable. All right. That is, the true owner's rights supersede the rights of the holder in due course. Okay. What is a holder in due course? The person who has held the check in good faith. Okay. Since X obtained the check from a person who had no title, X can claim no title solely because the check was crossed, not negotiable. Okay. If the check was not crossed, not negotiable, then X could have claimed the better title. Thus, not negotiable crossing not only protects the rights of the true owner of the check, but also serves as a warning to the endorsees to inquire thoroughly before taking any checks. What should they inquire? Whether the person who is transferring the check, do they even have the authority to do so? Okay. Not negotiable restricts the transferability of the check, and in case of transfer, the transferee will not get a better title than that of a transferee. Okay. And if the check becomes not negotiable, it lacks negotiability, not transferability. Okay. Here you have certain specimens that are given in your module. So your general crossing, you either have no name, you have and co, or not negotiable written. In case of your special crossing, you specifically have the bank name mentioned. Okay. You may or may not have your lines. Okay. Special crossing may or may not have your parallel lines. Okay. May or may not have your lines. Okay. So you just have the name of the bank. You have the name of the bank with the lines. You have the name of bank with the lines with not negotiable mention, and you have the name of the bank with not negotiable mention. All right. So I hope you have been able to understand all of the topics that we've been discussing. All right. If you have any doubts, feel free to drop them in the chat box or in the comment section once the live has ended. We would be more than happy to help you out. And you could also join the WhatsApp group wherein you will all of your doubts will be addressed. And mentorship program gives you a step ahead wherein you will also be getting mentorship, that is either one-on-one or group mentorship sessions with our academy teachers. All right. So I hope you are clear with the concept of crossing. The next concept is that of your maturity, which we will be studying. All right. Now, just allow me a moment before we proceed with understanding your maturity. All right, great. Let's proceed with understanding the next topic, that is that of your maturity. All right. So now, when we speak of maturity, now let us understand based on the types of instruments that are there. Okay. So what is your maturity? The maturity is the date when your payment becomes due. Okay. Maturity is basically the term of the instrument. Okay. Maturity is basically the term of the instrument. Okay, so what are the different types of instruments that are there? So your checks, we understood in the beginning itself, it is always payable on demand. What were the two additional conditions of your check? So it is a bill of exchange, which is payable on demand and drawn upon a specified banker. Okay, your bills or promissory notes are payable either at a future date or a specific period. Okay, so immediate payment is payable at sight on presentment, which is payable immediately. Okay, so when is your maturity applicable? Okay, maturity applies only after date, after sight, or after a certain event that is to happen. All right, so what is maturity? Maturity is basically the term of instrument, that is the date when your payment of the instrument becomes due. All right, next, what is your days of grace? So we saw this in case of your bill of exchange. Okay, we saw this in the case of your bill of exchange, wherein we understood that 3 days of grace is allowed. 3 days of grace is allowed for your bills or notes. That is, maturity is the last day of grace. Okay, so let's say, for example, your bill was payable, say, on 31st of March 2026, plus 3 days of grace will make it 3rd April 2026. Okay, 3rd April 2026, and this becomes your maturity. Okay, 3rd April is your maturity. Okay, so no grace days for your check and electronic negotiable instrument. So when we were seeing the difference between your bill of exchange and your check, we saw that in case of check there are going to be no grace days at all. Installment is each installment gets your 3 days grace. So the end of the installment plus 3 days will be your grace period. Okay, how do you calculate your maturity? That is, period ends on the corresponding date of the month. Okay, and if there is no corresponding date, last day of the month. Okay, let's say, for example, 10th of every month, it means 10th Jan plus 3 days, 10th February plus 3 days. If there's no corresponding date, 31st Jan plus 3 days, 30th August plus 3 days. Okay, let's say, for example, 31st Jan plus maturity is 1 month. Okay, what is 1 month after Jan? Feb does not have 31 days, so Feb has 28 days. So 28th Feb plus 3 days, it is going to be your 3rd March. Okay, similarly, 30th August plus 3 months is 30th November plus 3 days. So what is this 3 days? This 3 days is going to be your grace period. Okay, this 3 days is going to be your grace period. Okay, so that, I hope you are able to understand the concept of your maturity as well as your grace period. Okay, next is your holiday rule and importance of your maturity. Okay, if maturity falls on a public holiday, okay, let's say, for example, 15th August is when your maturity is, so then your maturity happens to fall on 14th August. That is the previous business day, basically previous working day. Okay, example, if Sunday is maturity, it is payable on Saturday. Let's say Saturday is also a public holiday, then it will be payable on your Friday. Okay, importance, it must present the instrument on maturity date. Payment cannot be demanded before your maturity, and suit can be filed after your dishonor. Okay, so maturity is when you can actually demand your payment. All right, next is the concept of your holder. Okay, so time and again we have been seeing that your check and your bill of exchange has to be paid to your holder. Okay, so who is the holder actually? So the holder is the person who is entitled to either the possession of the instrument or to receiver or recover the amount. Okay, must be the payee. Payee is the person to whom it has to be paid to. Endorsee is the person to whom the endorser has endorsed it to, and bearer is the person who holds it. Okay, who holds it? Okay, mere possession is not holder. Let us now understand this. Okay, so who is a holder in due course? So just like how we understood payment in due course, right? What is payment in due course? If it is done as per the apparent tenor of the instrument without any negligence, in good faith, then that payment is said to be in due course. Similarly, we have the concept of your holder in due course as well, right? So who is your holder in due course? So holder in due course is the person who obtains the instrument for consideration before maturity in good faith, and even if there is a defective title without knowledge of your defective title. Okay, even if there is a defective title without the knowledge of your defective title. All right. So types: bearer is the one who is in possession. Order is either the payee or the endorsee. So who is the holder in due course in case of a bearer instrument? The one who has it in possession. In case of the order instrument, the one who is payee. Okay. So who is a holder in due course? The person who holds the instrument and has obtained it for a consideration well before maturity, in good faith and without knowledge of your defective title. Okay. Let's say you knew that the check is stolen and you are still holding it. You will not be a holder in due course. You should have no knowledge of the defective title. Okay. Conditions for your holder: you must be a holder, you must have given consideration before maturity, instrument is complete and regular, and you have acted in good faith. Okay. Next, capacity of parties. Okay, this is something like your competency to contract. Okay, so capacity is same as the capacity to contract. So every person capable of contracting can make, draw, accept, endorse, deliver your negotiable instruments. Okay, so every person capable of contracting. Quick reminder: who is capable of contracting? A person who has attained maturity, that is more than or equal to 18 years of age, someone who is of sound mind, and someone who is not disqualified by law. Who can be disqualified by law? For example, your insolvent people. So any person who has the capacity to contract can also make your negotiable instrument, draw it, accept it, endorse it, and deliver it as well. Who is not liable? Of course, the ones who are not competent to contract. Who do you think falls under this category? You have your minor, lunatic, idiot, a drunken person, and disqualified person. Why do you think these are not liable? Because they are not capable of making decisions. Okay, they are not capable of making decisions, and hence they will have said to be no competency to contract. Okay, so they are someone who is not capable of making your decisions. Okay, so incompetency of one party does not affect liability of competent parties. Okay, minor as the endorser or payee, other parties still remain liable. Okay, so just how in the case of your partnership you could admit your minor for the benefits of the partnership, your minor can be someone who is receiving a check. Okay, it so happens especially in your schools. So let's say you've secured really good marks in your 10th, right? You're often issued checks as a token of appreciation for what you have achieved, right? So you can definitely be the endorsee and the payee, but you cannot be the maker, drawer, or the endorser, right? So so anyone who is making the instrument, okay, who is drawing it, who is endorsing it, they cannot be a minor, but the minor can be a endorsee or the payee. All right. Next, what is the liability of the drawer? Okay, what is the liability of the drawer? Let's say someone has drawn a check. Okay, so liable on dishonor. Okay, let's say you did not have sufficient balance and the person, let's say A, had issued a check to B, your check bounced. Okay, so you will have to compensate the holder. Okay, it could be B or the person to whom B has endorsed it to. Why? Because it was your mistake that your bank did not have sufficient balance before you actually issued your check. Okay, that, and your notice of dishonor should be given. Okay, that is, your bank should have informed you that listen, your check has been dishonored, right? Often these days you have a SMS alert which is coming in, right? Every time amount is credited, there's an SMS alert. Every time amount is debited. Okay, so bank is giving a notice of dishonor to you by sending an SMS saying your check is bounced and it did not clear through. Okay, then in that case your drawer becomes liable to the payee. Okay, undertakes instrument will be accepted and paid and will compensate on dishonor. Okay, so when I am issuing a check, okay, when as a drawer I am issuing a check in favor of B, it is my responsibility that the check will be accepted and paid as well. And my liability is secondary. Whose is the primary liability? The banker's liability is primary. Okay, my liability is secondary. The banker's liability is primary. Why? So if the banker does not pay, okay, for any reason, then it will be my responsibility to pay. Exception is no notice needed in an accommodation bill. Why? Because there was no real transaction itself, right? There was no real transaction itself. Liability of drawee of check. Okay, drawee of check. Okay, so it is the banker's duty that the banker must honor the check. Now, when will the banker, so who is the drawee here? Drawee is the banker. Okay, drawee is the banker. Okay, so what is the banker's duty? That, what are the conditions? When do you think a bank must honor the check? There should be sufficient funds that are available. They are properly applicable. Okay, let's say for example you have 1 lakh rupees available in your bank account. Okay, and the check is for say 80,000. Okay, On the face of it, yes, you have sufficient balance. Okay, but let's say, for example, the customer has told that at all times there needs to be a balance of 40,000 available in my account. So what does that mean? Only 60,000 is actually usable amount, right? So it is not applicable. So in that case, the bank may still dishonor the check. Okay, the check is duly presented, and consequence of your wrongful dishonor, that is the banker is liable to whom? Drawer. Okay, so who is liable to the payee? The drawer is liable to the payee. Who is liable to the drawer? The banker is liable to the drawer. All right. Next, liability of the maker and the acceptor. Okay, so in case of your maker, it is your note. In case of your note, it is your maker. In case of your bill, it is the acceptor. Okay, so who are these parties? They are nothing but the ones who are paying. Okay, so they are the payers. Okay, so in promissory note, if I am making a note, I am promising someone to pay a certain sum of money. So I become the payer. In bill of exchange, A is ordering B to pay to C. So B is the payer, B needs to accept, right? So please make sure that you are understanding that the maker of a note and an acceptor of the bill are both going to be payers of that negotiable instrument. Okay. So your liability is absolute, unconditional. When do you think you must pay? At maturity according to the tenor, and the payment has to be to the rightful holder at the rightful time. Okay, what do you think this reminds you of? This is nothing but your payment in due course. Okay, this is nothing but your payment in due course. All right, so it becomes very important for you to understand that in the maker. Okay, in whose case do you think there's a maker? In the case of a promissory note, there's a bill of acceptor in your bill of exchange. Is there an acceptor in check? No. Why? Because check does not require banker's acceptance. All right. Yes. Liability of the endorser, liable to the subsequent holders. Okay. So no contrary contract, the liability is not excluded. Any notice of dishonor is given. After dishonor, it is treated as payable on demand. Okay. So whom is the endorser liable to? So if I have received a check, okay, saying A will pay me rupees 5,000 and I am endorsing it to C, okay, then I will be liable only to C. Okay. No previous holders, any subsequent. And then say C endorses it to D. Okay. So C will be liable only to D, not to me. Okay. What are the conditions where your endorser will be liable? There is no contrary contract that I will be liable to C and D. Okay. Liability is not excluded specifically in your contract. Your notice of dishonor is given, and after dishonor, it is treated as payable on demand. Okay. And not payable on a particular date. Next, liability of prior parties or prior parties liable to holder in the due course. Okay, that is maker. That is whoever is the maker should make sure that they have an account. Okay, sorry, your promissory note. Drawer should make sure that you have an account. Acceptor should make sure that in case of your bill of exchange, the acceptor should make sure that they are in the capacity to make the payment. Okay. Endorser should make sure that they have the title to even endorse the instrument. And all of these liabilities are your joint and several liabilities. Okay. Next, liability inter se. Okay, various parties to a negotiable instrument who are liable thereon stand on a different footing with respect to the nature of liability of each one of them. Okay, that is, there can be different parties to a negotiable instrument, and with each of the party, you can have a different liability. Okay, there's a different footing with respect to the nature of liability for each one of them. Okay, let's say, for example, as a banker. Okay, as a banker, you are liable to whom? You are liable only to the drawer. Are you liable to the payee? No, you are not liable to the payee. Okay. Next is your acceptor in fictitious name. Okay. So liable even if the acceptance is fictitious when you are a holder in due course and your endorsement appears genuine. Okay. Endorsement appears genuine. That is, let's say, for example, if someone has endorsed an instrument to you, okay, and you are a holder in due course, that is, you have believed that the person who has endorsed the instrument has full title to endorse it, then you will not be liable. Okay. Just a second, please. Yes. And the last one is your liability of acceptor of your forged endorsement. Okay. An acceptor of a bill of exchange already endorsed is not relieved from your liability. Who is the acceptor? Acceptor is a payer. Okay. Of a bill of exchange is not relieved from liability by reason that such endorsement is forged if he knew that or had reason to believe that the endorsement is forged when he accepted the bill. Okay, so let's say for example C has endorsed a bill of exchange in favor of D. Okay, but you very well were aware that C's signature was forged. Okay, you were very well aware that C's signature was forged, then you will have to be accountable for it. All right, so I hope you are clear with the different types of liabilities that are there in the case of your checks and your bill of exchange. All right, the next topic is that of your negotiation, which we will be starting from tomorrow's class. All right, so before we conclude today's class, let's quickly go back to the module to see all of the topics that we have discussed so far. Okay, yes. So now we will speak about your maturity. We understood the maturity here. That is, when is your check said to be mature or instrument said to be mature? During the term. Okay, when the term has ended. Okay, either a specified date or a specified period of time. Okay, that is the date on which an instrument falls due is called its maturity. All right. According to section 2, maturity of the promissory note or bill of exchange is the date on which it falls due. According to section 1, a promissory note or a bill of exchange payable at sight or on presentment is payable on demand. Okay, it is due for payment as soon as it is issued. The question of maturity therefore arises only in case of a promissory note or a bill of exchange that is payable when after date or after your sight. Okay, so I'm just quickly revising this because we've already studied this in detail in our presentation itself. Okay, maturity is the date on which the payment of an instrument falls due. Okay, the payment of an instrument falls due. Every instrument payable at a specified period after date or after sight is entitled to how many days of grace? 3 days of grace. Okay, but which instrument does not have your grace? Your check or your electronic instruments does not have your grace period. Okay, so no grace are allowed for your checks. Okay, so where a note or a bill is expressed to be payable on the expiry of specified number of months or after date, the period of payment terminates on the date which corresponds with the date of the instrument. All right. Now there are illustrations which we just saw. Negotiable instrument dated 31st March is 31st Jan is made payable after 1 month. What is 1 month after 31st Jan? So Feb does not have 31. So it is 28th Feb plus 3 days, 3rd March, right? And the other two examples are also something we just saw. If it falls on a public holiday, it will be the previous business date, okay? That is not next, but previous. Very important to remember. So if you say it is falling on Sunday, then the payment date will due to be Saturday and not Monday for that matter, okay? Next is your holder. Okay, that is according to section 8. Who is the holder person? Who is the person who is in possession of the instrument, who is entitled to recover or receiving its amount? Okay, who is a holder in due course is a holder who is a person who for consideration has obtained the instrument. The payee or the endorsee if payable to order before its maturity and they did not believe, okay, they had sufficient cause to not believe that this person does not have title to it. Okay, he must be the holder, obtain the instrument for value or consideration. Okay, instrument should have been obtained before maturity, should be complete and regular on the face of it, and should the holder should take the instrument in good faith. Okay, then we went on to understanding your capacity of the parties, that is capacity of the party to incur liability. Okay, how is it? It is similar to that of your liability or your capacity to contract. Okay, that is who can contract? Someone who is of a major age, someone who is not disqualified by law, someone who is of sound mind. Okay, who cannot? Minors, lunatics, idiots, drunken persons, and persons otherwise disqualified by their personal law. All right. But minor can be what? Minor can be an endorsee or your payee. Okay. Very, very important. In this case, the other parties remain completely liable. Okay. Now we understood the different liabilities of the parties. Okay, now you have the liability of your drawer. Okay, so the drawer of a bill of exchange in case of dishonor, okay, is liable to compensate whom? To the holder. Okay, holder or the payee. Okay, the nature of the drawer's liability is that by drawing a bill he undertakes that on due presentation it will be accepted and paid. Okay, in case of dishonor he will compensate the holder. That is, if the payee has presented it duly, the banker will pay it. But if it has been dishonored, then he will compensate the holder, right? Let's say you did not have did not have sufficient balance and it is dishonored, then you will compensate the holder. Okay. The liability of the drawer of a bill of exchange is secondary and arises only on the default of the drawee. Okay. Who is the drawee? The person whom you're ordering to make the payment. Okay. Liability of drawee of the check. Who is the drawee of the check? It is nothing but your banker. Okay. The drawee of a check, the drawee of the check having sufficient funds is properly applicable to make payment. All right. And in case of any default, he will compensate the drawer for the loss. Okay. As a check is a bill of exchange which is drawn on a specified banker, the drawee of a check must always be a banker. Okay, this is something that we have been discussing and studying time and again, that your drawee of a check must always be a banker. Okay, the banker therefore is bound to pay the check of the drawer, that is customer, if the following conditions are satisfied. Sufficient funds are there, funds are properly applicable, that there is no kind of lien on that or there are no reserves. The check is duly required to be paid on banking hours on or after which it is payable. Okay, if the banker is unjustified in refusing, it shall be liable for damages. Okay, let's say for example, what is a valid reason for rejecting? You don't have sufficient funds. Okay, but if you had say sufficient funds and still rejected, you will be liable for your damages. All right. Then you have liability of your maker of note and acceptor of bill. Who do you think these are? These are nothing but the ones who will be paying. So the payer, right? In promissory note, the one who is making the note is liable to pay. In case of your bill of exchange, the one who is accepting will be liable to pay. Okay. So in the absence of a contract to the contrary, the maker of a promissory note and the acceptor before the maturity of the bill of exchange are bound to pay the amount thereof at maturity and according to the apparent tenor of the note or the acceptance respectively. Okay, the acceptor of a bill of exchange at or after maturity is bound to pay the amount, right? It follows that the liability of the acceptor corresponds to that of the maker of the note. Why? Because they are the ones who will be paying the amount. Liability of endorser. Whom will the endorser be liable to? Any parties which are subsequent to him. Okay, so whoever endorses and delivers a negotiable instrument before maturity is bound to every subsequent holder in case of the dishonor of the instrument by the drawee. Okay, or acceptor or maker to compensate such holder for the loss or damage. Okay, provided there's no contract to the contrary. So if the contract specifically say that the endorser is not liable, then he is discharged of his liability. Okay, he endorser has not expressly excluded, limited or made conditional his own liability, and due notice of dishonor has been given to or received by such endorser. All right. Next, liability of prior parties. Every prior party to a negotiable instrument is liable thereon to a holder in its due course until the instrument is duly satisfied. Okay, prior parties may include maker or drawer, acceptor, and all the intervening endorsers to a negotiable instrument. Okay, so the liability of prior parties to a holder in due course is joint and several. Then we had a liability inter se, that various parties to a negotiable instrument who are liable stand on a different footing with respect to nature of liabilities for each one of them. Liability of acceptor of forced installment. Okay, so if a acceptor of bill of exchange which is already endorsed is not relieved from liability because the endorsement is forced. Okay, if he knew, okay, if he knew, then he will be liable. If he did not know, then he will not be liable. Okay, acceptor's liability on a bill drawn in a fictitious name. So a bill which is drawn in fictitious name and is payable to the drawer's order is not by such name because it is fictitious relieved from liability. Okay, so the acceptor will not be relieved of liability to any holder in due course claiming that an endorsement made by the same hand as the drawer's signature and purporting it to be made by the drawer, that is the payee had reasonable grounds to believe that it is the drawer's signature, but it was actually not. Why? Because it was made in a fictitious name. All right, so I hope you are clear with the different types of liabilities that exist based on different situations. All right, so the next topic is that of your negotiation, which we will be studying in tomorrow's class. So tomorrow's class we will complete negotiable instruments chapter, and then we will proceed to part 2 of this subject, which is your management. All right, so we aim to complete your classes for your business laws and management by Friday itself, so that within March you have your subject which is completed, and then you can use the remaining months to revise for your exams. All right, so I hope everyone is clear with the topics that we discussed in today's class. All right, if there are any doubts, feel free to drop them in the chat box below, or even after the live has ended in the comment section. All right, you can also join our WhatsApp group, wherein you will have all of the notes and materials that we are using in class being shared with you, any important class or exam related updates and announcements. And if you require mentorship now that your syllabus has changed and you require additional guidance, please feel free to contact us at this contact number here, and we would be be more than happy to help you out. So our mentorship programs offer one-on-one personal mentorship, group mentorship sessions. You will also have your writing practice, especially for your descriptive subjects, and tests with corrections. Okay, weekly tests as well as your mock exams with corrections. All right. So please feel free to reach out to us at this contact number, and we will be more than happy to help you out with all of the details. All right. So thank you so much for joining today's class. I will again see you in tomorrow's class, wherein we will complete this chapter and conclude part A of this subject. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I will see you tomorrow.